The mining outpost floated in the empty black of space, its metal walls groaning softly under the pull of the nearby gas giant. Inside, the hum of machines filled the air, steady and constant, except for one section, where the sound had changed. In the energy core room, the hum had grown uneven, deep vibrations rolling through the floor as if something alive was breathing inside the machinery. Jack, the human engineer, stood at the control console, eyes fixed on the flickering red numbers. Kayla, the young alien officer assigned to oversee the core's operation, entered with her usual confident stride. Her uniform was sharp, her posture flawless, and her golden eyes glanced over the displays with only mild interest. She didn't share the human's nervous energy. "Why are you still in here, human? Your shift ended 20 minutes ago," she said, her voice calm and slightly mocking. Jack didn't look away from the readings. "Because something's wrong. The containment field is unstable. I told you before, if you start the core's next cycle now, you could trigger an overload." His tone was low but firm, each word deliberate. Kayla folded her arms, a faint smile on her lips. "Your kind always worries too much. We've run this cycle dozens of times. It will hold." Jack finally turned toward her, his face pale in the blue glow of the screens. "No, it won't. Look at the harmonics. The numbers aren't lying. You need to delay the sequence until I can stabilize it." She shook her head, brushing a strand of dark hair behind her pointed ear. "Our schedule is tight. The Council expects a full energy load before the storm season begins. You humans think danger is everywhere. But this is just a machine, and I have work to finish." Jack's jaw tightened. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "That machine is one wrong frequency away from blowing a hole in this station. And if that happens during a storm, nothing will save us." The room seemed to grow colder as Kayla moved past him toward the control panel. Her long fingers hovered over the touchpads, the glow reflecting off her sharp features. "You forget, human. I was trained for this. I don't need your permission to operate my station." A deep vibration rolled under their feet, the sound almost like distant thunder. Jack's eyes darted back to the screen. The power output spiked suddenly, then dipped, like something outside was pulling at it. He glanced at the viewport above the console. The blackness of space was no longer empty. Wisps of gray mist swirled far in the distance, moving too quickly to be a natural gas cloud. "Kayla," he said sharply, "stop and look." She didn't turn. "Storm clouds. I've seen them before." "Those aren't clouds," Jack said, his voice rising. "That's the storm. Early. And if you start the cycle now." The lights flickered, casting the room into momentary darkness. When they came back, the mist outside had doubled in size, and faint flashes of movement. Long, smooth shapes shifted inside it. Jack's stomach tightened. He reached out, grabbing her wrist before she could input the final sequence. "Listen to me. You start it now, and we won't have a station left to argue in." Kayla's eyes narrowed. "Let go of me." The hum from the core grew louder, a low, pulsing sound that made the panels tremble. Jack could almost feel it in his teeth. He saw the containment readings climbing into the yellow zone, each warning light blinking faster. He imagined the field collapsing, the raw energy bursting free, and the storm outside tearing into the station. "Kayla, I'm begging you. 10 minutes. That's all I need to reroute the stabilizers." She pulled her wrist free with a sharp movement. "We don't have 10 minutes. This order came from above. I obey my orders. You obey yours." Jack opened his mouth to argue again, but a deep metallic groan echoed from the far wall, as if the station itself had felt something heavy press against it. The air temperature dropped another degree. He could see his breath in the cold. The comms unit on Kayla's belt crackled to life, a distorted voice barking instructions, but the signal was broken, drowned in static. She tapped the device, frowning, then turned back to the console. "Enough. Step aside, human." Jack stepped between her and the panel, his voice now tight with frustration. "You have no idea what's coming through that storm." Her golden eyes flashed. "And you have no idea who you're speaking to. Move." The low vibration became a violent shudder. Somewhere far below them, a deep clang echoed like a bell struck underwater. Jack looked up at the viewport again. The mist outside was now a roiling wall, and within it, dark forms shifted with purpose. They were moving closer. "Kayla," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "If you do this, there's no going back." She hesitated for half a second, then pressed her hand flat against the console, initiating the activation sequence. The hum spiked into a roar, the light from the core turning a blinding white-blue. Jack's console screamed with alarms. Outside, something in the mist turned its glowing eyes toward the station. The first shockwave of the storm slammed into the hull. The air turned colder, sharp enough to sting with every breath. Jack's hands flew over the console, trying to cancel the sequence, but the system rejected his commands. The core's containment field shimmered, its light no longer steady, but pulsing like a heartbeat. Kayla stared at the readouts now, her confident smile gone. She could see the fluctuations, could feel the change in the air. The hum had become an uneven thrum, as if the machine was struggling to hold itself together. Beyond the viewport, the swirling mist had grown thicker, blotting out the stars. Inside that wall of storm, strange shadows moved, slow, deliberate shapes that didn't shift like clouds. Jack leaned forward, his jaw tightening. "They're feeding on it," he muttered. Kayla shot him a glance, but his eyes stayed locked on the display. The power readings confirmed his fear. Something out there was draining the station's energy, pulling it straight from the unstable core. The intercom hissed with static before a distorted voice broke through. "All units to stations, breach imminent." Then nothing but white noise. Kayla tried to respond, pressing the button on her belt, but the comm spat back more static. She tapped it again, frustration building. Jack stepped back from the console. "We're blind and deaf. Whatever's in that storm, it's cutting off comms." Kayla's eyes darted between the display and the viewport. The mist outside seemed alive now, flowing in unnatural patterns. Then she saw it, two faint golden lights within the haze, moving closer. They weren't reflections. They were eyes. Her chest tightened. What is that?" "Not something you want getting inside," Jack said, his voice low but urgent. "We need to lock down this section and get to the blast doors before." A low metallic groan echoed through the hull, followed by a deep, resonant thud. The deck shivered under their feet. Somewhere in the lower levels, alarms began to wail, their high-pitched cry almost drowned by the rising roar of the storm outside. The lights overhead flickered, casting the room into a strobe of shadow and glare. Kayla turned back to the controls. "If I reverse the cycle, maybe I can—" "You can't reverse it now," Jack cut in. "It's past the fail-safe. If we're lucky, we can bleed off some power before." The viewport flashed white as something slammed into the outer hull. The impact was followed by a scraping sound, like claws dragging across metal. Kayla's fingers froze on the panel. The sound came again, slower this time, deliberate. Whatever it was testing the station's skin. Jack grabbed a small toolkit from under the console and slung it over his shoulder. "We're out of time. Core room's a target now. If they break through, they'll head straight here." She hesitated, staring at the displays, the warnings stacking faster than she could read them. "If we shut the core down—" "We can't," Jack snapped. "Not without triggering the failsafe meltdown. We need to move." Another deep clang rang out, closer than before. This time, both of them turned toward the hatch at the far end of the room. The door vibrated as something heavy slammed into it from the other side. Kayla's hands curled into fists, her training telling her to stand her ground. But when the metal began to bend inward, she felt her stomach drop. Jack moved first, striding toward the maintenance corridor. "Kayla, now!" She followed, glancing back only once. The hatch bulged again, the metal stretching like soft clay under pressure. The screech of tearing steel followed them into the corridor. The narrow passage was lit only by dim red emergency strips along the floor. The air smelled faintly of ozone, each breath tasting of metal. Their boots clanged against the grating as they moved, Jack leading with quick, sure steps. Kayla stayed close behind, her head turning at every echo. Another impact rattled the bulkhead beside them, sending fine dust falling from the seams. Jack didn't slow. "There's a service shaft ahead. We can get to the main blast doors from there." The corridor twisted, and for a moment, the storm outside was visible through a small observation port. Kayla's eyes locked on the sight. The mist churned like boiling water, and inside it, more shapes moved, long, jointed limbs gliding effortlessly through the haze. Each one had the same faint golden eyes. There were more of them than she could count. Her mouth went dry. "How many?" "Doesn't matter," Jack said quickly. "If even one gets in, it's over." They reached the service shaft. Jack knelt, prying open the heavy grate with a hiss of released air. A wave of cold rolled out, making Kayla shiver. She hesitated, peering into the narrow tunnel. "This is your plan? Crawl through that?" "Unless you'd rather meet what's knocking on our doors," he replied, already sliding inside. Kayla followed, the walls of the shaft pressing close around her. The sound of their movement echoed ahead, mingled with the low groans of the station under strain. Behind them, the corridor lights flickered and went out completely. The only light left was the dim red glow ahead of Jack. A loud metallic crack rang out from somewhere nearby, followed by the screech of something forcing its way through metal. Kayla froze in the tunnel, her breath quick. Jack's voice came from ahead, steady but tense. "Don't stop. Not for anything." She forced herself forward, every muscle tight. The shaft opened into another corridor, this one wider but equally dim. Jack stood, scanning both ends. The blast doors were still 2 levels away. Then the sound came again. Footsteps, but wrong. Too heavy, too slow, each one making the deck plates groan. They were close. Kayla met Jack's eyes. He didn't need to say it. They both knew. Whatever was outside had just gotten inside. The corridor was silent for only a heartbeat before the sound returned. Slow, heavy steps that sent faint vibrations through the metal floor. Jack's eyes swept the shadows, his hand instinctively moving to the small sidearm at his belt. Kayla's ears twitched at each footfall, the rhythm unnatural, too deliberate. The red emergency lights flickered overhead, stretching their shadows across the walls. A sudden clang echoed down the passage, sharp and jarring. Kayla spun toward the sound, her pulse quickening. At the far end of the corridor, something moved. At first, it seemed like shifting smoke, a black mist swirling where no air currents should be. Then the mist solidified, long limbs emerging from the darkness, fingers ending in curved metallic claws that dragged against the floor. Its skin shimmered like liquid shadow, and from its head, 2 faint golden eyes glowed, unblinking. Jack took a step back, his voice low but urgent. "Don't stare at it. Move." Kayla's breath caught in her throat. The thing tilted its head, as if studying them, then stepped forward. Each movement was soundless except for the scrape of its claws on metal. Behind it, the mist thickened, and more shapes began to form, slender, jointed silhouettes gliding into the corridor without a sound. "They're multiplying," Jack said, grabbing her arm. "Go!" They turned and ran, boots pounding on the deck. The emergency lights made the corridor a stuttering tunnel of light and shadow, each flicker revealing the creatures closer than before. The station's bulkheads groaned, and faint trails of frost spread along the walls where the creatures passed. A blast door loomed ahead, its panel flashing yellow. Jack swore under his breath and sprinted faster. He reached the control pad and began typing override codes with quick, practiced fingers. Kayla stood beside him, her eyes darting down the hall. The lead creature moved with eerie grace, covering ground far faster than any living thing should. "Hurry," she said, her voice trembling despite herself. The panel beeped, and the heavy door began to slide open. Cold mist poured in from the other side. It wasn't safety, but it was distance. Jack shoved her through before following and slammed the close command. The door began to descend, but just as it was about to seal, a clawed hand shot through the gap, talons screeching across the floor. Kayla reacted without thinking. She grabbed a loose steel pipe from the wall and slammed it down on the arm. The creature shrieked, a high-pitched sound that vibrated in her bones. The claws withdrew, and the blast door sealed with a heavy thud. For a moment, there was only the sound of their breathing. Kayla lowered the pipe slowly, her hands shaking. Jack scanned the new corridor, his jaw set. That bought us time. Not much, but enough to reach the core room. They moved again, following the path that twisted through the maintenance decks. The air here was thinner, colder, carrying the faint scent of ozone. Overhead, the metal creaked and popped, the whole station straining under the storm's pressure. As they rounded a corner, a distant alarm blared, its sharp tone echoing through the decks. Kayla frowned. "That's from the outer airlock." Jack didn't look back. Means they found another way in. The corridor ahead split into 2 routes. Jack pointed left. "That way's faster." Kayla glanced right. A dim light flickered from that direction, and for a second, she thought she saw movement. Something's there. "Exactly why we're not going that way," Jack said, pulling her toward the left path. They hurried through the narrow space, the walls pressing close. The hum of the core was louder here, pulsing through the deck plates under their feet. Jack's mind worked quickly, calculating how much time they had before the creatures reached it. If they fed on the energy directly, the explosion wouldn't just kill them, it would rip half the outpost apart. A faint hiss drew Kayla's attention. She slowed, scanning the shadows. Through a maintenance grate on the wall, she saw another shape sliding through the vent system, its claws leaving deep gouges in the metal. Her stomach twisted. They're inside the vents. Jack's face hardened. Then they'll be ahead of us soon? They reached another blast door, this one guarding the final stretch to the core room. Jack entered the access codes, his fingers moving fast. The door groaned open, revealing a wide, dimly lit corridor that ran straight to the reinforced core chamber. Halfway down the corridor, the mist appeared again. It poured in from ceiling vents, curling along the floor. From it, 3 more of the creatures emerged, their golden eyes fixed on the 2 figures at the far end. "They're guarding the core," Kayla said. "Then we break through," Jack replied, pulling his sidearm. The creatures moved as one, gliding forward without sound. Jack fired, the energy rounds flashing blue in the dark. The shots struck one creature, but instead of falling, it staggered and hissed, its body twisting unnaturally before regaining balance. Kayla grabbed the steel pipe again, her grip tight. "They're not stopping." "Then don't stop either," Jack said, charging forward. They ran straight at the creatures, Jack firing and Kayla swinging the pipe with sharp, desperate strikes. The first creature lunged, its claws slicing the air where Jack had been a second before. Kayla's strike connected with its head, the blow ringing like a bell. The thing collapsed into mist, but 2 more took its place immediately. Jack dove past one, rolling toward the core room's access panel. "Kayla, keep them off me!" She planted herself between him and the creatures, every muscle tense. The pipe was heavy in her hands, but she swung with precision, striking claws away, ducking under lunges. Each time she landed a hit, the mist swirled violently before reforming. Jack's fingers flew over the panel. The heavy core chamber doors began to slide open, inch by inch. "Almost there!" A claw grazed Kayla's arm, slicing through her uniform. She hissed in pain, but didn't back down. She swung hard, connecting with the creature's shoulder, forcing it back. The doors finally opened wide enough. Jack grabbed her arm and pulled her inside, slamming the emergency seal. The creatures hit the reinforced door from the other side, the impacts shaking the walls. They were inside the core room, but the pounding outside told them it was only a matter of time before the creatures followed. The heavy seal locked into place with a loud clang, but it did little to ease the tension in the room. The reinforced walls vibrated faintly under the pounding from outside. Each strike was deep and deliberate, as if the creatures knew exactly where to hit. Inside, the core room glowed with an intense blue light, its cylindrical chamber pulsing like the heart of some giant beast. The air was warmer here, charged with static that made the hair on their arms stand. Jack hurried to the control console, sliding his toolkit onto the table and opening it with quick, practiced hands. "We don't have much time. The core's output is spiking higher with every second. If they breach while it's at this level, the explosion will vaporize us." Kayla kept her eyes on the sealed door. She could hear the creatures scraping at it, claws screeching against the thick metal. The sound made her jaw tighten. "How long until you can stabilize it?" Jack didn't look up. "Stabilizing isn't the plan. Not anymore. I'm going to bleed off the excess power into the external relays, buy us a window to shut it down safely." Kayla frowned. "That's risky. If you overload the relays, they'll burn out," Jack finished. "Better the relays than us." Another deep thud shook the room. A thin line of frost began creeping along the edges of the door, seeping inward. Kayla's eyes narrowed. They're freezing it, weakening the metal so they can break through. Jack swore under his breath, working faster. His fingers danced over the touchpad, bringing up cascading lines of code. The console beeped warnings in sharp tones, each one more urgent than the last. "I need 3 minutes." "You'll be lucky to get one," Kayla said, gripping the steel pipe tighter. She positioned herself near the door, her body tense, ready to strike. The pounding from outside grew louder, more violent. With each hit, the thick door bent inward just enough for Kayla to see tiny bursts of mist hissing through the seams. Her breathing slowed, every sense focused on the space in front of her. Jack's voice was calm but fast. When they get through, aim for the head or the joints. It slows them down. I noticed, she said without looking back. The first dent appeared in the door's center, a shallow but growing crater under the repeated blows. Kayla stepped forward, planting her feet. She could see the faint glow of golden eyes through the mist. Suddenly, the pounding stopped. The silence was almost worse. Kayla's ears twitched, trying to catch any sound, but the air was still. She glanced back at Jack. They're not gone. I know, he said, not pausing his work. Their repositioning means they're about to. The wall to their left buckled inward with a deafening screech. Metal tore like paper as one of the creatures forced its way through, bypassing the door entirely. Kayla reacted instantly, swinging the pipe in a brutal arc. It connected with the creature's forearm, snapping it backward with an unnatural twist. The thing shrieked, a high metallic wail that made the console's monitors flicker. Jack grabbed a small handheld emitter from his toolkit and tossed it toward her. Shock baton! Use it! She caught it, activating the crackling blue field at its tip. The creature lunged again, claws flashing, but she sidestepped and drove the baton into its torso. The jolt sent a ripple through its shadow-like body, tearing it apart into a swirl of black mist before it faded completely. Nice, Jack said, eyes still locked on his code. But don't relax. They never come alone. As if on cue, two more creatures slid through the jagged hole in the wall, their movements quick and spider-like. Kayla switched her grip, her stance low. The first lunged, and she met it with a shock to the head, the sizzle and pop filling the air. The second darted low, slipping around her and heading straight for Jack. Behind you, she shouted. Jack turned just in time to jam a small arc welder into the creature's face, blasting it with a burst of searing heat. The smell of scorched metal and ozone filled the room as it dissolved into nothing. The console beeped loudly, displaying a countdown in large red numbers. Jack's eyes narrowed. 1 minute until discharge. Keep them off me until then. Kayla didn't answer. She was already moving, striking the third creature as it slid down from the ceiling vent above. Sparks flew as the baton connected, the creature shrieking before vanishing into the mist. The pounding at the original door resumed, harder than before. The frost along the edges was thicker now, small cracks spiderwebbing through the metal. Kayla's eyes darted between the weakening door and the jagged wall breach. We're not going to hold both sides. Jack's hands moved in a blur, his voice tight. Then we don't. 30 seconds. The creatures didn't wait for the countdown. 3 of them burst through the damaged wall at once, their movements a blur of shadow and claws. Kayla fought like a cornered predator, every strike fast and precise, the baton crackling with each hit. One fell, then another, but the third slipped past her and launched itself toward Jack. Kayla didn't think. She dove, slamming into Jack and knocking him aside as the creature's claws ripped through the console. Sparks erupted, the room filling with the smell of burning circuits. The countdown hit 0. The core flared, its light blazing white-blue. A deep, vibrating hum filled the room as the energy discharged into the external relays. The shockwave slammed into the walls, throwing both of them to the floor. When Kayla pushed herself up, the creatures were gone, blasted into mist by the wave of power. Jack staggered to his feet, checking the console's damage. We bought ourselves a few minutes, he said, his voice grim. But the core's still unstable, and they know exactly where we are. From somewhere deep in the station, a distant, echoing shriek rolled through the metal halls, answering his words. The air in the core room was heavy with heat and the smell of scorched metal. Faint blue sparks still danced along the edge of the damaged console, casting short flashes across the walls. Kayla wiped sweat from her brow, her breathing sharp and fast. Jack leaned against the railing near the core chamber, his eyes scanning the readouts on the one still functioning screen. The numbers were bad, worse than he'd expected. The discharge dropped the output for a moment, he said. His voice low, but it's climbing again. We're past the point where stabilizing it is an option. Kayla's golden eyes narrowed. Then what do we do? Jack turned toward her, his expression grim. We overloaded on purpose, force the core into a full detonation, and take everything in the blast radius with it, including them. Kayla stared at him, shocked. That will destroy the entire station. You'll kill us. His gaze didn't waver. If they take the core intact, they'll drain it, grow stronger, and move on to the colonies. Millions will die. We're not making it out unless we stop them here. For a moment, the only sound was the low, uneven hum of the core. Kayla's throat felt tight. How long will we have after you start it? 2 minutes, maybe less, and that's if nothing interrupts me. The pounding on the reinforced door started again, harder than before. A loud metallic groan followed as the frost on the hinges thickened. Kayla glanced at the breach in the wall they'd fought through earlier. It was darker now, but mist still curled from its edges. "They won't give you 2 minutes," she said. Jack moved to the console, his hands flying over the controls. "Then you'll have to buy me that time." Kayla tightened her grip on the shock baton, its blue energy crackling in her hand. She stood between him and both entry points, her body tense and ready. Her heart pounded in her ears. But her mind was clear now. No more arrogance, no more doubt. If this was the fight, she was going to see it through. The wall breach flickered with movement. A long, jagged claw hooked over the edge, pulling a creature through with an unnatural, fluid motion. Its golden eyes locked on Kayla instantly. She didn't wait. She stepped forward and drove the baton into its chest. The sizzle and shriek came together, the creature bursting into mist, but already another was crawling through behind it. At the same time, the door shuddered violently. The center panel bulged outward as something huge slammed into it again and again. The sound of cracking metal filled the room. Jack didn't look up from his work. 1 minute 40? Kayla ducked as the second creature lunged, swinging her baton upward into its jaw. The electric burst ripped through it, scattering its body into vapor. Her breathing grew heavier, sweat running down her back, but she kept her stance strong. The door gave one final groan before it split. A jagged crack tore down the center, and through it, a massive creature pushed its way in. This one was taller than the rest. Its limbs thicker, its claws long enough to scrape deep grooves in the deck. The golden glow of its eyes was brighter, almost burning. Kayla's grip tightened. "Big one." Jack's voice was calm but fast. "Ignore it. Just keep it busy. 1 minute 15. The massive creature stepped fully into the room, the frost it carried spreading instantly across the floor. Kayla moved quickly, circling to keep it away from Jack. She jabbed with the baton, but the creature swiped with one enormous claw, forcing her to leap back. The impact split the deck plating where she'd been standing. Another smaller creature slid through the breach in the wall, joining the fight. Kayla swung the baton at it without turning from the larger one, the strike catching it in the side and sending it crumbling into mist. But the big one was faster than it looked. It lunged forward, its claws slicing through the air. One caught her shoulder, tearing into the fabric and grazing skin. She hissed in pain, but drove the baton forward, stabbing it into the creature's side. The electrical surge rippled through its form, making it stagger. Jack's voice rose over the noise. 45 seconds! Kayla backed toward him, forcing the big creature to follow. Its steps shook the floor, and every breath it exhaled sent mist curling into the air. She darted left suddenly, drawing it away from the console again, then slammed the baton into its leg. It roared, a deep sound that rattled the core chamber. The door's broken panels fell away completely, and two more of the smaller creatures poured in. Kayla's muscles screamed in protest, but she moved without hesitation, striking the first in the head and kicking the second toward the big one. Jack's fingers flew over the last lines of code. 20 seconds! Get ready to run! Kayla spun away from a claw strike, the movement bringing her back toward Jack. Where? There's nowhere safe from a detonation like this. We're not staying in the open. The maintenance shaft under the console, it's shielded. It won't save us from the shockwave, but it'll buy us a chance. The massive creature lunged one final time, its claws stretching for Jack. Kayla didn't think. She threw herself into it, driving the baton into its neck with all her strength. The light flared so bright it left spots in her vision. The creature stumbled, falling sideways and taking down one of its smaller allies with it. Jack slammed the final key. The core's hum became a deafening roar, its light blinding. 10 seconds! Kayla dropped the baton, grabbed Jack's arm, and they dove for the open hatch beneath the console. The heavy grate slammed shut above them just as the first violent pulse of the overload shook the room. The last thing Kayla saw before the hatch sealed was the massive creature turning its golden eyes toward them, even as the light consumed its form. The hatch slammed shut, plunging them into a narrow, pitch-black shaft beneath the console. The air was hot and metallic, thick with the vibration of the core above them. Jack's breathing was fast but steady as he pressed himself against the wall, listening to the deafening hum grow even louder. Kayla crouched beside him, her shoulder aching from the claw wound, the pain sharp every time she shifted. Above them, the pounding of claws continued for a few seconds, then stopped. A low, drawn-out creak followed, like metal warping under pressure. Kayla's ears twitched at the sound. It wasn't just the creatures moving. The entire station was groaning as the overload built toward its peak. "How long?" she whispered. Jack's voice was tight. 40 seconds. The heat intensified, searing through the steel under their boots. Sweat dripped down Kayla's neck, but she kept her gaze fixed upward, as if she could see through the hatch. She thought about the big creature, the way its eyes had locked on her, even as the light had engulfed it. She didn't believe it was gone yet. The shaft trembled violently, dust raining down from the seams. A sudden clang echoed through the metal walls, much closer than before. Kayla's breath caught. "They're down here." Jack turned sharply toward her. "What?" Another clang came from below, followed by the sound of metal tearing. Jack swore under his breath. They found the service tunnels. The space was too tight for running, but Jack moved quickly, leading her deeper into the maintenance shaft. The walls were lined with thick cables that hummed faintly with residual power. The sound of tearing metal followed them, echoing closer with each step. Kayla's grip tightened on the shock baton she had retrieved before diving into the hatch. She didn't know how well it would work in the confined space, but she had no intention of going down without a fight. A loud crash came from behind them, and Kayla spun. A small section of the shaft wall had been ripped away, and a creature's clawed hand reached through, its black mist curling into the tight space. The golden eyes appeared next, glaring through the gap. Jack shoved her forward. "Move! We're almost at the junction." The shaft angled sharply downward, forcing them into a low crawl. Kayla's shoulder screamed in pain, but she pushed forward. Behind them, the creature began forcing its entire body through the gap, its movements jerky in the confined metal walls. The scraping of claws against steel was almost unbearable. The hum from the core deepened into a heavy, vibrating thrum. Jack glanced at the small wrist display strapped to his arm. 15 seconds! They reached the junction, a slightly wider space with two diverging paths. Jack didn't hesitate, taking the left tunnel. Kayla followed, but as she turned, the creature lunged from the right path, its claws swiping across her back. The force threw her against the wall, the shock baton clattering from her hand. She gasped in pain, grabbing the nearest cable for support. The creature tried to follow, but Jack was already moving back toward her. He swung the heavy metal tool from his belt, a wrench, and slammed it into the creature's head. The impact made the thing hiss, its form rippling like disturbed water. "Go!" Jack shouted. Kayla scrambled forward, scooping up the baton. The tunnel ahead dipped sharply before ending at a reinforced grate. Jack dropped to his knees, yanking at the release handle. It resisted for a second, then gave way with a loud metallic snap. They slid through the opening into an even smaller chamber, round, with curved walls lined in heat-resistant plating. The air here was hotter still, every breath thick with the taste of burned metal. Jack slammed the grate shut behind them, locking it into place just as the creature's claws scraped against it. The golden eyes peered through the narrow gap, unblinking. The roar of the core above grew deafening. The floor began to vibrate so hard it rattled their teeth. Jack pulled Kayla down beside him, pressing her to the floor. "Cover your ears. Now." The first blast hit, an invisible wave of energy that made the chamber groan and buckle. The heat became unbearable for a split second, then it was gone, replaced by a shockwave so strong it knocked the air from their lungs. The creature at the grate was torn apart instantly, its body unraveling into mist that vanished in the heat. The chamber lights flickered and died. Only the faint red glow from emergency strips remained. The noise faded, replaced by a low ringing in their ears. Jack slowly sat up, his chest heaving. "That was it," he said, almost in disbelief. "The core's gone." Kayla stayed still for a moment, catching her breath. Then she lifted her head. The metal around them was scorched black, but the chamber had held. Jack crawled to the grate, peering through the gap. Beyond it, the shaft was silent. No claws, no mist, just the settling of cooling metal. Kayla's voice was quiet. "Did we kill them all?" Jack didn't answer right away. His eyes scanned the dark shaft, but there was nothing to see. Finally, he turned back to her. "Maybe, but if even one survived..." She nodded slowly, understanding. The station might be empty now, but she didn't feel safe. Not yet. Far above them, somewhere in the ruins of the core room, a faint, distant sound echoed through the metal, soft, deliberate steps. Jack froze when he heard it. The slow, deliberate steps echoing faintly through the ruined station above. The sound was soft, but in the silence after the blast, it carried like a whisper in an empty room. Kayla met his eyes, her golden gaze sharp and alert. She didn't need to ask what he'd heard. The air in the small chamber was still hot, every surface scorched black, but the vibrations from those steps made the heat seem distant. Jack moved to the grate quietly, peering through the narrow gap. The shaft beyond was dark, but somewhere far up, he could see faint movement, shadows shifting against the dim red glow of the emergency strips. "It's impossible," Kayla whispered. "The overload should have destroyed everything." Jack's jaw tightened. Then either it wasn't close enough, or this one's different. The footsteps stopped. Silence filled the shaft again, so heavy it made Kayla's ears ring. She reached for her shock baton, but the charge indicator was dead. The weapon had burned out during the fight. She set her jaw, gripping the steel pipe she'd carried earlier, its surface still warm from the blast. A faint scrape came from above. Something was moving down the wall of the shaft, slow and controlled. The golden glow appeared next, two unblinking eyes in the darkness, fixed directly on them. Jack stepped back from the grate. "It's coming." Kayla moved to the other side of the chamber, giving them space to fight. The creature's claws hooked into the metal above the grate, bending the bars outward. It didn't rush. It seemed to enjoy the process, the way prey animals sometimes froze before the strike. With one final pull, the grate tore free, clattering to the floor. The creature stepped into the chamber. It was larger than the others, but not as massive as the one they'd fought earlier. Its form shimmered in the red light. Every movement smooth and unnervingly silent. Jack held the heavy wrench in both hands, his knuckles white. "Aim for the head, then the chest. Don't give it a chance to recover." Kayla nodded once. The creature tilted its head, the glow of its eyes flaring slightly. Then it lunged. Jack swung first, the wrench whistling through the air and connecting with the side of its skull. The impact made a dull, wet sound, but the creature only staggered back a step. Kayla was already there, bringing the pipe down hard on its arm. The limb twisted unnaturally, but instead of breaking, the shadowy form seemed to melt and reform instantly. "It's faster!" she shouted. The creature spun, swiping at her with claws that tore deep grooves into the wall where she'd been standing a second before. Jack moved in again, jabbing the wrench into its chest, forcing it back toward the narrow tunnel they'd entered from. The thing hissed, a sharp metallic sound that made the chamber's thin walls vibrate. Kayla darted to the side, swinging for its legs. The blow connected, sending the creature sprawling to one knee. Jack seized the moment, lifting the wrench high and slamming it down toward its head. The creature caught the wrench mid-swing. The metal screeched under its grip, the shaft bending like soft wire. With a sudden jerk, it ripped the weapon from Jack's hands and hurled it into the wall. Jack staggered back, unarmed. Kayla stepped in, shoving the end of the pipe into the creature's throat. She pushed hard, using her full weight, forcing it against the wall. The golden eyes burned brighter, and its body began to writhe, the shadowy form growing unstable. "Now!" she yelled. Jack grabbed one of the scorched cables hanging from the ceiling. Sparks danced along its length. Without hesitation, he slammed the live cable against the creature's side. The burst of electricity lit up the chamber in a blinding flash. The creature shrieked, the sound high and broken, as its body convulsed violently. Kayla held the pipe in place until the golden glow dimmed, then faded completely. With one last shudder, the creature's form unraveled into black mist that vanished in the hot air. Silence followed, broken only by their heavy breathing. Jack dropped the cable, his arms trembling from the effort. Kayla lowered the pipe slowly, her eyes scanning the room as if expecting another to appear. That was the last one, Jack said, though his voice carried no certainty. Kayla exhaled, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. If it wasn't, we wouldn't be standing here. Jack glanced at the scorched grate on the floor. Either way, we can't stay. This chamber's not stable, and the station's coming apart. They climbed back into the shaft, moving upward toward what was left of the main decks. The heat gave way to cooler air as they rose, but the silence was unsettling. No alarms, no voices, just the distant groans of the station's damaged frame. When they reached the upper level, the devastation became clear. The core room was gone, nothing left but a gaping, scorched cavity in the floor. Sections of the wall had melted into twisted shapes. The storm outside had thinned, revealing the black emptiness of space. Kayla stepped to the viewport. The mist was gone. No shadows moved in the distance. For the first time since it began, the stars were visible. Jack came up beside her, resting one hand on the cracked glass. "Looks like we did it." She didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed on the stars, her mind replaying every moment, every warning she'd ignored, every second they'd fought to survive. Finally, she spoke, her voice low. "I should have listened to you." Jack gave a faint, tired smile. "Next time, maybe you will." Kayla turned to him. "There won't be a next time. If I see anything like that again, I'm shooting first." Jack nodded once. "Good." They stood in silence for a moment longer, then turned away from the viewport. The fight was over, but the station was dying, and they still had to make it out alive. Somewhere in the quiet wreckage, the sound of a distant hull fracture echoed, reminding them both that their survival wasn't guaranteed. Not yet.